This is the 2022 Cube Stereo Hybrid 160 SL. This bike has been completely revised for 2022, with a brand new frame to accommodate a bigger Bosch battery and completely revised suspension kinematics, which Cube say offers a lot more progressive suspension platform than previous models. The new bikes are now equipped with Bosch's Smart system, so new tech, new battery and new geometry. The bike is also much longer in reach than before, with XL models now finally suiting those who prefer longer bikes, with a reach in XL at 504mm. £4,999, and for that you get a carbon bike with a new Bosch Smart system, big 750 battery, 160 travel on the rear and 170mm fork with this Rockshox Zeb. Gotta say, out of the box it looks like an absolutely banging bike in terms of value for money. So the geometry is definitely more up to date than ever before for a Cube electric bike, but still a 65-degree head angle with 160 rear and 170mm fork. There's no pushing any boundaries from Cube, and this bike is one of only a few models running on 27-inch wheels, both front and rear. It's kind of this mix of old and new. A mishmash of trail and enduro bikes. Long travel, like an enduro bike, but with smaller wheels. And geometry that's more trail bike oriented. But when it actually comes to the ride, that's not a bad thing at all. The bike weighs 24.5 kilos. Not too bad considering there's a lot packed in here. Starting with the big 750 Wh removable Bosch battery. On paper at least, there's not a lot out there that matches it in terms of bang for buck. For under £5,000 to get a bike of this spec looks pretty incredible. Shimano drivetrain, it's even got an XT rear derailleur. Decent tyres out of the box, no budget ones that you're going to need to change. These are max grip double down Maxxis tyres. Rockshox Zeb with 170mm travel. When the cost of pretty much everything is rising in 2022, it looks like you don't need to spend an insane amount of money to get a really great handling electric mountain bike. It actually turns out that this long travel e-bike is a really decent trail performer. Its 27.5-inch wheels really do help it feel more nimble and agile than it should do, despite its fairly hefty weight and long travel. And the suspension platform is leagues apart from the predecessor. This entry-level bike really does punch way above its weight. It's helped massively by the decent spec tyres, the stiff Rockshox Zeb fork out the front, and the lively rear suspension kinematics. But surely there's got to be some compromises somewhere. So I'm not massively happy with the battery cover on this. It does move around quite a bit. You can see just as I'm moving it, it's kind of not fully sealing. Now there is an adjustment screw in there and I've tried a couple of different settings on it, but it feels to me like it's not quite 100% sealed onto the frame. And if I kind of move it around with my fingers, you can see now there's a bit of a gap up there, and then I can kind of push it back in and it clips in. So this feels a little bit budget and not quite secure, especially if you're hitting some of the, you know, rockier, more technical, gnarly terrain. This seems to get a little bit dislodged. So I'm gonna have to play around with this a little bit more to see if I can get it to fit in nice and snug and nice and secure. And there is a release mechanism just at the bottom. Yeah, it just feels like the bike is built to a budget to get this to fit onto the frame. So the Bosch has always been a fairly loud motor on the descents, rattling, and you can hear the clunk noise. Now, some frames are not as loud as others. This is one of the loudest frames in terms of amplifying that clunking noise I've ridden in a long time. So as the bike's moving through the travel and you're freewheeling, you get quite a lot of this kind of clunking noise through the motor and through the entire frame, and you can hear it even just here. You can hear a bit of a clunking noise. Now, sometimes I think frame designers are kind of lucky with how it resonates through the frame, and some frames in particular are pretty quiet. You can still notice it, but it's more of a damped thud. But this to me sounds like quite a metallic rattle on even some gentler terrain like this. When I'm freewheeling, I've just got my pedals level and I'm going over little branches and sticks. You can hear this kind of clunking noise. It's a bit like living next to a motorway though. You do get used to it. So if this was the bike that I rode all of the time, your brain just filters it out. But definitely a point about this bike is it is noisy. One of the things I'm most impressed with the bike is the suspension. I remember riding the previous gen and thinking the bike felt a little bit stiff and a little bit wooden feeling. But now, even with this budget basic Rockshox shock on the back, the rear end feels way more supple. And actually for some of the steeper drops and the chutes, I don't think I felt any bottoming out at all. And one of the biggest surprises is the Zeb. This is the budget Zeb, or the more budget friendly Zeb. It's just the select model. The damping in there seems really good and the chassis is really stiff. So I'm very, very impressed with the way the bike feels and handles. It tips in really quick. It's nice and supple suspension, both on the front and the rear. Because it's 27.5 front and rear, you can maneuver around the tight and twisty stuff effortlessly. It's the biggest surprise so far of the entire bike. The suspension is way more refined, just to me feels way better than the previous generation. And what that does is it leads to more confidence, more grip in the corners, and I've mentioned the tyres a few times, they're just so grippy. You could probably almost get your elbows down or knees down and still these tyres would dig in to the dirt. Yeah, I'm really surprised so far. And the Bosch Gen 4. Well, there's not a lot more to say about this motor system over my previous videos on it, other than it's an absolute delight to ride. The motor is perhaps the most punchy and powerful feeling motor on the market. It offers loads of well-balanced torque to climb stupidly steep terrain, and with the bigger Bosch 750 watt-hour battery, all-day rides are well within reach. If I'm being picky, the bike really does need a steeper seat angle for seated climbs, but as long as you're happy to get out of the saddle, the bike, with its grippy tyres and punchy motor, will just carry on climbing as long as you can keep spinning the pedals. I really cannot fault the rest of the spec on the bike. The Shimano drivetrain works brilliantly. It's just a little bit heavier than the really premium stuff, but the shifting quality is superb. The rest of the finishing kit is pretty decent. It's Newman, so bars, stem and wheels. They're on the slightly heavier side, but who cares? The bike is a big heavy e-bike and a few grams here and there are not really making a significant difference. So after a full day riding the bike, using the battery, I'm on 4%. I've got to say I am really, really impressed with the bike. More so than anything, the way the bike actually handles, which is pretty much the most important thing when you get a bike. The front and the rear suspension and the 27.5-inch wheels make it feel really smooth, supple, agile, but it's got enough suspension on tap for some chunky stuff, some big hits. The head angle at 65 degrees is surprisingly okay, even on a bike that is a little bit too small for me. So I'm surprised with how it handles. I had this vision in my head that it would be really nervous and the suspension, because it is the lower entry level suspension from Rockshox, would feel a little bit harsh, but I'm really, really surprised with how it handles. Now, there are some things with the build of the bike. I mentioned already that this battery thing just feels a little bit cheap, and I can see there's gaps on this side, and I think that needs to be better. I'm going to have a play around to see if I can actually make it fit a little bit better. And the charging port feels a little bit weak, feels like it might break. But those things aside, I've got to say the bike is a really impressive electric mountain bike. Now, it's not built for the roughest, chunkiest enduro and downhill trails, but I do think with a bit of fettling, you could set it up to do that if you wanted to. If you wanted to really make it slacker, you could put an angle set headset reducer in it to slacken out the head angle, but you honestly do not need to do that. If you just want to go out and have a great time on an electric mountain bike that's going to give you a great ride experience, then this is something that I would really recommend. In fact, I'm really considering purchasing one for my family because it's that type of bike that it's comfortable to ride, it's easy to get along with, it's got a big battery, looks pretty good, it's got the Bosch Smart system with the super punchy and powerful, really responsive Bosch motor. And I do think for $4,999, yes, it's a lot of money, but comparatively, you are getting a lot of bike for your money. So I do really recommend this bike. I've had some good fun riding it and looking forward to taking it out some more. Subscribe if you want to see more, because I'll try and bring out a longer term review of this. I've got it for some time, and thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you all soon.